Brilliant. Okay.
We're live.
All right. So, namaste, Tara Kaushal, and welcome to the author experience conversation and the ODHR experience conversation that we've clubbed together today as the Women's Day week special and exclusive. And we are very happy that you could join us all the way from the Gold Coast in Australia. And we also welcome all the people who have joined us on Facebook Live, who would be looking into kind of listening into gain some great insights from you about why men rape, which I think is a very apt topic for the Women's Day week exclusive. So welcome once again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jerry.
Right. And in the author experience conversation, we basically kind of celebrate and felicitate and kind of, promote authors in three genres. One is the self-help genre, the leadership genre, something that I specialize in because I'm a leadership coach and a mentor by profession. The second is genres related to autobiographies or stories of real heroes, like what I write in my books. And the third genre is current affairs, world affairs, socio-political, economic, concerns, which are written by many in books, like former bureaucrats, former politicians. These are the three genres that we promote on the author experience conversation. And every Thursday we actually have the HR experience conversation, which is about how do you kind of really promote best practices in people development to create learning and development in the corporate sector and in other organizations. So we are clubbing the two today to celebrate the Women's Day exclusive with you. So welcome once again.
Thank you.
So Tara, to start with, I just learned that you call yourself a Bombay girl. Like me, I'm a Bombay boy. I was raised there. I've spent 3 decades of my life in Bombay. I was born in Goa, raised in Bombay, went to Xavier School, college at Xavierite, died in the wool Xavierite, like I call myself. So walk us through your life story and your journey of life, not just in your professional years, but right from childhood to where you are now.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm a naval officer's daughter.
Right.
I was born in Bombay, but I lived all across the world. I mean, all across the country. And eventually found myself back in Bombay because in India, that's the only city I will ever live in. I love it.
Okay.
And I still call myself a Bombay girl. That's home, though I'm currently in the Gold Coast. I'm married to a photographer called Sahil. And that's been a really positive experience. And I'm the mother of many dogs and many cats. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Okay. And which school did you go to?
You mean schools?
Yes, yes.
13.
Schools, yes, schools.
I've done a whole host of naval public schools and then St. Anne's in Bombay, Welham Girls, Delhi Public School, Noida, and then I did my college in Delhi at JMC and my master's in Bombay at Mumbai University.
All right, excellent. So that's been your academic the academic years in school and college, etc. So which St. Anne's was this in Bombay?
In Fort.
Oh, in Fort, St. Anne's Fort. So say you studied there. Okay, excellent.
Yes.
And walk us through a little bit of what you do in the media space as a media professional. I've been reading some of that on your website.
So
Tell us more about that.
I came out of college. I came out of college having studied gender and post-colonial studies and literature.
Right.
And then straight off the bat, I started writing about gender and sexuality. And that's what I started with, of course. But then I was 24 years old and God offered this phenomenal opportunity to be the launch editor of BBC Good Homes magazine, India. Mm-hmm. And I was 24. And as a 24-year-old starving writer, you don't say no to opportunities like that. So I think that I was there for 4 years and that started my journey with, what I call content creation.
Right.
So I was the content head for the relaunch of the Taj website. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of branding and communications for hospitality, decor, and even supplement clients. And that's something that also continues to pay the bills at the moment, because
Okay.
as much as I would like to say that gender pays all the bills and writing about all of this Jhande Mar stuff pays the bills, it doesn't. So I continue to work in that space with a whole host of clients as well.
Great. And you continue doing that.
A little bit on the side. I mean, as Why Men Rape became this really big book and became a bestseller, and there's a documentary in the works. I mean, some of that is which
Taking your
was,
time and space now.
and also some of the monetary pressures are off the media consultancy, so I can focus a little bit more on the writing and what I intend to do with that. And I have another book coming up with HarperCollins as well, another one with HarperCollins. So that's also taking my time. The deadline looms.
So what is the theme of the next book?
It's about a rape and murder that happened in Agra 8 years ago.
Mhm.
It's a narrative nonfiction piece. And I just felt that it was, you know, when Me Too happened, and even though the obvious thing that Me Too is a protest against due culture. It's a
Right.
I mean, gosh, God, the words escaping me. But sorry. So Me Too was a protest against, the fact that due process does not work for women.
Right.
But even, I mean, some of the backlash was the media pecuario. Why aren't you following due process?
Right.
And I think this is a book that explores what due process actually means in India.
Right.
So it's a case that I've followed for 4 years now.
Mhm.
And then it's due to be published later this year.
Okay. What are the dates that the book would hit the stand? Anything fixed as yet?
No, the reason it isn't fixed is because the trial is ongoing.
Okay.
So until
Okay.
such time as the trial is concluded, we can't finish the book, and then there's all of that happens after. So I have no clue about the timeline yet, but it's probably the end of the year.
All right, brilliant. So I was inspired. I write books which are like, if you can see on the screen, I write books which are true stories of real heroes. And when I say real heroes, they're not movie stars or cricket stars or celebrities. They are people who are very ordinary, but who have gone for extraordinary, right? Like a person called Lakshman Singh, who's transformed over 500 villages from wastelands into wetlands. And, I've always been inspired because we also kind of have the Rex Karmovir awards that we do, where we recognize real heroes who are doing something to make a difference in our world. And I remember when I launched the book in 2010 at a press conference, one of the journalists said to me, she said, who's going to read the stories of these people? Because people want to read about Shah Rukh Khan and people want to read about, Sachin Tendulkar. So why are you wasting your time? Because your books won't sell. And I said, but Shah Rukh Khan and Sachin Tendulkar don't inspire me because you think they're heroes. They're not. They're mere celebrity. But the real heroes who are really doing good work on the ground and changing the country, changing the world, changing society every day, nobody's celebrating them. Nobody's recognizing them. And that's what actually inspired me, because I was inspired by a man I met called Dashrath Manji, who's a man who moved a mountain. And I said, I want to tell the stories of these people because no media is doing it, no magazine. So that is what motivated me to get into writing. So little did I dream of ever writing. But I said, how do you take the stories out to the world so that people know that there are real, huge, giant figures over there who are changing the world every day? So what was your motivation to finally get into writing?
Before I get into that, Jerry, I completely agree. I think celebrity culture, consumerism, and capitalism give us what we think are heroes, but we need better heroes.
True.
And we need heroes that are actually changing the world. And I'm sure, I do not think that art is to be scoffed at. And of course, artists like actors need to be celebrated. But celebrity culture, the way it is today, is toxic. And why do we have Forbes multi-millionaire lists, which is so important? But what about celebrating or being more aware of people who are doing philanthropy and things like the
Absolutely.
that you're mentioning?
And that's what we celebrate. And one of the objectives is exactly what you said, because the children and the youth should know who the real heroes are, failing which they also grow up just to kind of celebrate millionaires and celebrate, I have all respect for the creative arts but I also say that in India especially, and I think it's the world over, we indulge in idol worship. It's like the brouhaha over the Harry and Meghan Markle interview. Give me a break. What royalty are we celebrating? They were nothing but thieves and plunderers.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about? And I think therein lies the problem. So even in the lockdown, and I'm happy you triggered this, even in the lockdown, instead of celebrating all the, and we actually started a Thanksgiving campaign that let's say thank you to the truck drivers, grocers, shopkeepers, security guards, janitors who are working out there, and keeping us safe in our homes while we are celebrating, the Forbes millionaire list, right? Or the most powerful. What most powerful? How are you powerful when a small virus has held you to ransom? What powerful are you talking about? So I'm completely with you. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we have the same agenda, and I've always said this: we need better heroes.
Right.
We need people we can look up to that are beyond just celebrities and
True.
cricketers and actors. And I really appreciate what you do. Now, coming back to answering your question, for me, the motivation was for writing the book. So Why Men Rape was a culmination of a very long personal and professional journey. Professional because, I came out of college, I started writing about gender violence. I took 4 years off, gender and gender violence. I took 4 years off, did BBC Good Homes, and came back to writing about this. And then the Delhi gang rape happened.
Right.
And for me, that was a huge trigger. And I know it triggered the whole country, but for me, there were several things that made it really personal. I used to be the girl who traveled to Delhi University by bus from Noida. And I would be molested every single day. And it greatly impacted my attendance, though I loved college. So Jyoti Singh Pandey could have been me from 10 years before. A girl who took a bus to college. That could have been me. That was a huge trigger for me. And in 2013, I started thinking about this project and then planning for it, saving for it, because I knew I was going to go undercover. And in order to go undercover, I knew that not only would I not earn during the time that I was, working on the book, but also that all of the way I planned the book, that it would cost me a certain amount to actually execute. So that's when I started writing for the book, planning for the book, and also reading for it. Because although I had written about gender violence and studied gender, I had specifically studied gender violence. Mm-hmm. And I felt that if I had to do what I wanted to do with the book, I needed to know more. So for 4 years, between 2013 and 2017, I just read on gender violence. And then finally, in April 2017, I started working on this book full time. Finished it around this time last year. So it took me about 3 years. And then the book was out in June, on the 22nd of June. It is, I also think it's pertinent to mention that I am a survivor. I was raped at 4 or 5 by my gardener. So for me, a lot of my personality and ideology has been pivoted around the idea of violence and how it impacts our lives. And the question of, why should the actions of men impact my life? And why shouldn't they stop? And why should it always be me and women who are curbing our behaviors, who are coming home early while it's still daylight, who are, tracking each other on WhatsApp, whatever, trackers, because we are afraid. This is not the way half the world's population should be living. This is not a gender paradigm that's acceptable to me. And that's why I decided I would write the book. And
Very nice.
I did.
I'm very happy. You are a real hero for me and for the Rex Karmavir community, because you are a survivor yourself, and I'm happy that you felt the pain, because everybody went berserk in 2012 saying Nirbhaya, 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 and I always say we are not only the world's largest democracy, but we are also the world's largest hypocrisy, right? And nobody even knew the girl's name after it was announced in the media, because we just want to awaken, create some noise, write
Yeah.
some nonsense on Facebook and think we've done our bit. So Jyoti Singh Pandey, and we've actually named a award in the Karmavir hierarchy of awards called Karmavir Jyoti, which is a tribute to Jyoti Singh Pandey, who died, but I think exemplary bravery shown by the girl, that she decided, even while still in hospital, to fight. And I'm happy that all the culprits were brought to justice. But that said, I'm also picking on a few things that you said, which is about society at large, and it disheartens me. And I wrote an article called Namaste, we need to get Westoxified. Westoxicated was a word the Ayatollah Khomeini used to say that, we are just following the frivolous pop culture of the West. And I always say this, that we've taken the pop culture and the frivolous culture, but we've not taken the best practices of the West, like volunteering at the age of 7. While, at the age of 7, you see kids doing item numbers on Indian Idol shows. And these are the same parents who are crying out against rapists. Now, if you're actually teaching your kids to do item numbers, which is, I consider people, when you show men clawing and pawing women on the big screen, that's also a rape of the mind, right? So what do you think is the fabric of society which lives this kind of a hypocrisy? What do you think is the role of that society in this culture of rape?
Oh, a giant role. We can, every time there is something, a incident that happens, the first reaction that we demand, and the first reaction the government gives us, is to change the laws.
Right.
Okay. And honestly, that's tokenism, because it's really easy to change the laws. It's really easy to demand violence and say, hang the rapist. But the minute you want to talk about doing the hard work, the work to change the way we raise our sons versus the way we raise our girls, the way, we're always trying to impose our ideologies and arrange marriages and child marriages on girls and remove our women's, particularly women's personhood. We don't want to talk about that. We want that to be sacrosanct, because we don't want to address where it's coming from. And change on this level will come in two ways. It will come top down, of course, from law and legislature and all of that, the judiciary, the media. But it will also come within our homes, because we keep talking about a culture, but what is culture? Culture is us. Culture is you and I and what we're doing every day. In our personal spaces, with our sons. I'm not even talking about people who work in the NGO space, or people who are actively going out and saying, I'm a feminist and I'm doing this. But I'm talking about just our home spaces. And it does start from the home, because while I don't think rape is an act of a man, an individual man against an individual woman, I don't think that's true. At the same time, it is. It is that individual man who took a decision at that point that rape was the right solution for him. So I do think that we need to examine our culture. We need to examine everything from arranged marriage, forced arranged marriages. I know some people some people are okay with it, but we need to examine what a forced arranged marriage entails. We need to examine how we're bringing up our girls. Small things like women changing their surnames after they get married. These are all small issues that we really need to address patriarchy and misogyny in the culture that it is born in and it thrives in.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you, because, this is what I keep writing about, and in fact, I'm even against the practice of celebrating Women's Day. And I wrote an article that Women's Day is not the woman's way, because like you said, it's about the way you bring up your children. Mm-hmm. And even if that conscious or unconscious discrimination is there, even in urban households, educated households, you will see that the girl is being brought up that, what will she do by studying more? Because she has to get married after all, right? And I actually kind of spoke about this in the Women's Economic Forum around 3 years ago, and I said, that scene which Farhan Akhtar included in the in that movie called uh, Dil Dhadakne Do, whatever, where he says, "See, I've allowed her to work." Who are you to allow her to work? I mean, it's like saying that she's your property or something, right?
Yeah.
So I think overall the culture, like you rightly said, the culture of our country is made up by the people of the country, and unfortunately for us, we are still following all the blind beliefs and the dogmas. And I'm not political. When I say not political, I'm a citizen, so I take and participate in politics, but I'm not partisan. I'm apolitical over there. I don't believe in any party, and at the same time, I don't believe in any religion or God. And I always say that all this blind belief. So, because you have everyone worshipping goddess Lakshmi, especially because she brings in the money, and then you're killing the girl child before she's born. What kind of a hypocrisy is this, right?
Just yesterday, I was speaking to one of my friends about this. And he was studying his PhD from Berkeley. He was doing his PhD in India on Bombay Film Folk. And he said in 96 or something, he was first in India. And he went to Banaras and he watched Raja Hindustani in a theater.
Right.
And he said there's this scene where, and I haven't watched the movie, but he said there's this scene where Amir Khan beats up the bad guys to protect Karishma Kapoor. And the whole theater was cheering for Amir Khan. Whereas these are the same men who will go out and do exactly what they are, just behave the exact same way as what they see as the villains of the movie. So there is a certain amount of cognitive dissonance that we have as well.
Very true.
And that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is we have bloody Kabir Singh and things celebrating Kabir Singh and things.
There you go. Yes.
So there is overt stuff that we are celebrating in Bollywood. But even when we have a moment to teach, there is cognitive dissonance, there is resistance in the way people are accepting cinema. And that, I think you see everything, everyone, I think, sees the world in a way that is convenient for their own ideologies. And so celebrating Amir Khan, I guess, beating up Karishma Kapoor's potential molesters is different from what they would do in real life. So yeah, all of these, it's quite complex.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's why I always said we are the world's largest hypocrisy, right? And we need to change that, because unfortunately this is like, very sad. The late Sheila Dikshit. I remember there was a girl, I forget her name. She used to work with Tehelka at that time, so she was a journalist who was going home from work at 7:30 in the evening, and she was raped on the streets of Vasant Kunj. And Sheila Dikshit, who was a woman and the chief minister of Delhi at that time, said women should not step out after sunset.
So I don't know this particular quote, but nothing you can say about what the politicians of this country have said will surprise me at all.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous that women, I find it very amusing when women are agents of patriarchy. Especially women in power who know what the glass ceiling entails, who know the limitations of what patriarchy has imposed, the limitations that patriarchy has imposed on their lives.
Right.
And they continue again to have this cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
That says women are allowed to be the chief minister of Delhi, but sorry, we can't go out after.
You can't go after sunset because 7:30 is a day. Now, Tara, listen to this, and I mocked her and I tagged her in the same week. A boy was raped. A young boy who was 16 or 17 years old was raped in Gurgaon by 4 men. Right? And I tagged her. I said, Sheila Dikshit, now will you say that all men also should not go out after sunset, which means it'll become ghost town after sunset, right? But this is unfortunately what politicians, whether they are women or men, they talk nonsense, and we'll come to that later. But since the focus is on your book, What is the central theme of your book? Do you want to unpack that for us? I mean, why the title, Why Men Rape? What is the theme?
What do you think the theme is? It's
I
why
know, I want
men.
you to share it with the audience who are listening in.
I mean, I think it's quite a no-brainer in terms of what I'm talking about.
Right,
I was aghast at the questions, at all of this, these conversations, including the previous quote from Sheila Dikshit that you shared.
right,
I've been aghast at how we are so comfortable victim blaming
right, right,
always.
right,
You know, why it's always the woman. Why was she out? What was she doing? Who was she with? Was she intoxicated? What were the clothes she was wearing? Um, while and that panders to this whole stranger danger ideology, whereas women face most 95% of violence is actually committed by somebody known to the person. So all of this, it's so complex, and I feel that the conversation on gender violence is so nuanced in the academic sphere. There's absolutely no question of blaming the victim. You know, we're always talking about patriarchy and the role of the perpetrator. But in mass conversation, in the media, we're still having this conversation. So I just thought, I don't see myself, maybe now I do, but I didn't see myself as an expert when I started to write the book. And I was just, what I set out to do was to take all of this conversation, some of which was, you know, like problem solving 101. You never, I mean, if you have to understand a problem, if you have to solve a problem, you have to understand it. And it was for me to take all of this conversation that was in the academic sphere and kind of make it more accessible. And I feel that if there are people who only engage with the title of my book and don't read it, and that's all they take from it, you know, which is putting the onus back where it belongs on the men who perpetrate rape and not the women who feel like prey, I think that's a step in the right direction.
right. And that's absolutely well said and some great insights with. I completely agree with you. And you know, in what the poster that I shared of our conversation and the little write-up that I shared along with it talks about this, how we need to, you know, make men accountable and feel responsible for the crimes that they've perpetrated, and not just the men who've committed the rape, but the men who are also, you know, living in apathy. Because uh,
And there are some things that I feel, as feminist as men may be, there are some things that they don't want to accept. So somehow, yes, I agree, not all men rape. Okay. But every time you start talking about women's experiences with gender violence,
right,
that seems to be the first reaction. Sure, not all men rape, and yes, men are victims too, and we can deal with that separately. But if that's your first reaction to when we are discussing a far larger problem, then I think you're only bringing up that reaction in order to take away from the issue at hand.
absolutely,
The other thing is, you know, when feminists say, and a lot of research has gone into this, that not all men rape, but all men benefit from rape.
true,
Okay. And a lot of men resist this instantly. But if you look at all these gender norms that keep women at home, that keep women suppressed, that keep women out of the workplace, these gender norms come from the fear of our safety, protectionism, you know, they come from the fear of our safety. So when women are not in the workplace, you're not engaging with 50% of the population. You have that created for you. So some of these things, I feel that men need to listen when we're speaking, to kind of say that, okay, you know, I have benefited from the patriarchy. Just like it's easy for me to say I'm caste blind, and I was caste blind growing up, but that's a privilege afforded only to upper caste people. So all of these things are things that one must consider. And I think it's time for men to take down and be part of the change that we want to see, and actually call out toxic behavior and be openly feminist, because it's very important that we have these allies in the movement.
Very true. And I completely agree with you, because, whether it's rape or sexual harassment, which happens at the workplace, and a lot of people actually think that this is all about the sexual frustration of men. It is not. It's more a sense of entitlement. It's like feeling like you're God's gift to womankind. I mean, with all due respect to the sex work profession, some of the men who were called out in Me Too, and we will talk about this later in more detail, but most of those guys, they can afford the best if they really want to feel, get rid of their frustrations. But whether it's the Weinstein guy or people who did it in India, most of these people, they're mostly in the glamorous film industry, right? And you can actually see it was a sense of entitlement, and that comes from the socialization, the social culture that we grow up in, that we as men, as boys, are actually made to think that we are better.
Yeah.
And I think that's the balance, and that's the temperance which is required. And at this point, Tara, let me invite you to read a chapter or a paragraph from your book, which would kind of support what we have just spoken about.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Incidentally, given that
Can
I
we also have a
launched-
look at your book also, so that all the people in the audience can see it? Why Men Rape. Excellent.
Men Rape.
Over to you, Tara.
Thank you. Incidentally, because I launched the book in the pandemic and none of my book tour happened, the planned tour or anything, this is the first time I'm reading publicly from my book. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much.
The year was 2007. I had formed an intense friendship, as I'm wont to do, with a genius woman who was in a wheelchair. In our first few days of being friends, she volunteered to tell me that she had not always been paraplegic. It was only since she was 12 in 1995, where a surgery to correct a minor birth defect of the spine at a famous government hospital in New Delhi had gone wrong. Everyone expected her to emerge A-OK. Instead, her stitches came undone that first night and things went downhill from there. Life, as she knew it, would never be the same again. I hugged her, told her I was sorry. A few months later, we took a girls' trip together, just she and I. On our first night, we sat across each other in our hotel room, me on the bed, she on the sofa, our conversation flowing from the fun and frivolous to the feminine and intimate, to the feminist and intimate over alcohol. We were discussing how hard life became after her paralysis, the shock and adjustment, the social, economic, and medical complications, the lifelong pain, etc. When suddenly she said, I need to tell you something I've never told anyone before. The story I told you about the failed surgery, well, it wasn't the whole truth. Impassively, she told me what had really transpired as I sat there shocked, tears streaming down my face and goosebumps pricking my skin. Yes, she had gone into hospital to correct a minor birth defect of the spine. And yes, the surgery had failed. That much of the tale had been true. The only thing she had been omitting in the multiple retellings over 12 years was the details of how exactly her stitches had come undone. As she lay in her hospital bed the night after her surgery, the resident doctor, the very one who had assisted in her surgery, had put his hand over her mouth and raped her. Terrified and fading in and out of consciousness thanks to the painkillers and excruciating pain, she lay in her own blood, silently hemorrhaging until the nurses found her in the morning. Several surgeries would follow, but the damage had been done. My family blamed the main surgeon for the stitches coming undone and the permanent damage. Only I know the truth, and now you know. In the years that followed, the doctor continued to visit her on his rounds, where he would tisk-tisk with his team about her failed surgery and pacify her worried parents. She stayed silent and terrified as the salt burnt her wounds. The horror, the horror. This was no ordinary rape. What the doctor did was sadistic on so many counts. He raped a child, a bleeding child, in hospital. He was a doctor, ethically entrusted with the burden to care and heal. He was her doctor, and she was recuperating in hospital from a surgery he'd helped conduct. It is said that men with a high proclivity to rape are, quote, less knowledgeable about the negative impact of rape on the victims. But he knew fully well the dire medical consequences his 15 minutes of pleasure could have on her. At worst, she could have bled to death. At best, she would become a paraplegic for life. He must have known how exponentially scarring and sadistic his continued presence would have been. In Men Who Rape, the psychology of the offender, the Nicholas Grott typology outlines 3 types of rapists. He said the sadistic rapists have a sexual association with power and anger, where the infliction of pain itself is eroticized. They find their victims' torment immensely gratifying. Among other characteristics, he believes such rapist assaults are calculated and pre-planned, as the doctors had to be. My friend had nearly died. For some sadistic rapists, murdering the victim is the ultimate satisfaction. Her story would evoke horror as an impersonal news item or even in fiction. This is the real life story of one of my closest friends. I cried and brooded for days after she told me. So much for our fun girls' holiday. Cut to 10 years later, when I started the research for this project. I called her in the States, where she's a super successful career woman with a husband and child, and asked her if she would tell me the real name of the doctor. There was a moment of silence. I don't want to go down that route, babe. I have only ever told you and, she said, taking the name of her husband. I reassured her, and she told me everything she remembered about him. In mid-2018, I tracked him down to Pune and convinced him to speak to me. As I expected at the outset, studying the doctor was the hardest thing I have ever had to do, exacerbated by the recent death of my beloved mother-in-law. So that's it.
It's very moving, very touching. It's a real life encounter which you have faced yourself. And what did the doctor share with you?
He's a really famous doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And has had no consequences at all for any of his actions. And he lived this very privileged upper middle class life. And when I came away, and even in 2007, when my friend had first shared with me, I kept, I was so angry, and we would keep talking about it, that my reaction was always, we should go to the police and we should at least show up at his doorstep and swear at him and tell him or something. And one day, my friend, I was on a Bombay train and I was speaking to her on the train, and my friend said to me, Tara, just stop, because what you're recommending is great for your personality type. It's not what I want to do. I just want to forget. And even all these years later, I asked her, I said, now that I'm outing him, now that I'm talking about him, do you want to take this forward? And she's like, it's hard enough being a disabled brown woman in India, in the US, trying to make, myself, a career and a life for myself. I don't want to do this. And I get it. I think that not all survivors react in the same way. And it's okay for her to have chosen this, and it's not, I mean, I'm a writer and I've done what I could to combat rape culture. And I think everyone has a small role, some smaller than, and some just living feminist lives, and some
Right.
people writing books or running NGOs. But everyone has a role to play in changing rape culture. And this book is my giant feminist fuck you, really, to rape
Great.
culture.
Okay. Brilliant. And did the doctor show any remorse, or was there any feeling of repentance?
No, Jerry, I never confronted the men. I never told them why I was studying them.
Okay.
The
Okay.
point is that they don't exist. The point was not to do some sting operation and say, tumne rape kiya and batao. The point was to see the men in their cultural context and examine
Right.
all
Right.
aspects of their psychology. And because we're all social beings, we all live at the intersection of caste and class and money and psychology and sociology and anthropology and all of these things. And I just wanted to study that.
Okay. Okay. In the part that you read about from your book, you mentioned that there are three reasons or three types of men, rapists, who operate on three different levels. Can you unpack those three levels for us in more detail?
Okay, so that's what the Nicholas Groth typology says.
Right.
I have used some of his work, and I think he says there's a sadistic rapist, there's an anger rapist, and there's a sex rapist or power rapist. I can't remember. I think it's the power. But that was only some of the scholarship that is quoted in my book.
Right.
So there's a lot of newer scholarship.
Right.
But because I studied this for 4 years. And when I say read, I mean, I read every scrap of literature that existed,
Right.
or tried to, on specifically on rape. And so I don't think it is as simplistic as Nicholas Groth said it.
Yes.
And
That's
he
why I
did,
wanted you to unpack it. Yeah, because I feel there are many other reasons also.
yeah. And his scholarship is also now 40 years old.
Right.
At the very beginning of rape scholarship in the way that it exists today. So it has been updated and somewhat, but some of it is still valid.
Right. Yeah, because you speak about sadistic, which would be the psychopaths, the sociopaths, etc., the types of Ted Bundy, etc. Anger, I think, is again because it's like what we saw in a very old movie which tackled the issue of rape for the first time in India, which was called Insaf Ka Tarazu, which was more about anger, that you feel resentment that the woman has stood up to you, the woman has slapped you. And the third, of course, is the sex power that you were talking about, which is where the Weinsteins of the world or the Anirban Blas of the world from Bombay, and I'll name them, Anirban Bla, Vikas Behel, Afsar Zaidi, who are all called out in the Me Too, but nothing has happened. And they're moving around scot-free like they're actually God's gift to humankind.
So I have to tell you, so during the start of, I would say, Me Too phase 2, which was, LOSHA, the list of sexual harassers in academia, came out in 2017. But phase 2, when it actually came to Indian shores, which was 2018, I called out 2 people. And what was interesting to me was this. One was I was assaulted by Gautam Adhikari, who was then the editor of DNA, when I had gone for an interview as a 22-year-old to his office, and he assaulted me in his office. And the other was, I would say, a much more serious assault by this ad guy called Navroz Dhondi.
Serial culprit.
Yeah.
Serial culprit. I've actually warned him off because he tried misbehaving with a colleague of mine.
Right.
And to talk about it, Navroz Dhondi has a daughter.
Yes.
And I've never understood how he lives with himself.
So the assault or the attempted assault at the hands of Navroz Dhondi was way more, I would say, a lot more serious because it was physical. But nothing ever happened. And I'd say this socially, and also the media, because Gautam Adhikari was DNA and he was a bigger profile, the media constantly asked me about Gautam Adhikari. And it's a big story that has gone around, my takedown of Gautam Adhikari, who passed away a couple of years ago. So the media talked a lot about my Gautam Adhikari experience, but nothing ever became of Navroz Dhondi. To the extent that I don't even know.
He continues preying on pretty young things, as he calls it, and a complete scoundrel. I'm saying it on record. No, I've called him out a couple of times when he misbehaved. I had to actually warn him once that be careful, man. I'll come for you, right? And then he said, no,
Jerry, we should do this.
And I actually told him that, this is no way for you to behave with a young girl who just come to talk some business to you, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, come on, Jerry, it's a man. I said, no, don't talk to me. I remember I spoke to him whilst I was boarding a flight to London, and I said, I'm coming back in 1 week. If I don't have you apologizing to my colleague, I will come after you. He did call up and apologize and said, no, this is just my, he called it his natural way of behaving. He tried to hit onto my wife once on Facebook. She just blocked him. Anyway, we need to shame them and name them, because people should be aware. I was in a group of activists, and you triggered this thought, and I'm going to share it. And it was a group of people from the advertising fraternity who wanted to do campaigns for social good. And Mahesh Murthy's wife or partner, whatever their relationship may be, Ansu Gupta, her name is, was part of that group. And suddenly, overnight on LinkedIn, I get a call, I get a message from a woman who was depressed and distressed because Mahesh Murthy was making life miserable for her. And she shared the entire chat with me. And I put it on the group. And I said, this man is on this group. And I wouldn't want to be a part of this, And I said, this is not the first time he's being called out, because so many other people have called him out, including Rashmi Bansal. And I was actually told by the administrator of the group, who was also a woman, a very senior advertising professional who is to head the Lintas Media Group. And she says, Cherry, you can't post this here. His wife is in the group. I said, so what? His wife should know, right? And I quit the group. I left the group in disgust. I said, you all disgust me. It was like almost around 200 people who were so-called crusaders and activists on that group. And I completely relate this with what you said earlier, how we as a society have, kind of taken this like just for granted. It's okay. It's not okay. And what frustrates me even more is when the guys like Anirban Blah, who should have been in jail, who even kind of stage managed a suicide, a fake suicide, just to gain public sympathy. The likes of Deepika Padukone and others, and I've actually written to them that how do you still have this guy on your advisory board? It's not one person who called him out. It's not two people who called him out. Multiple women called him out. So it cannot be like, just a one-time accident or something. This is deliberate.
Jerry, I'm keeping all this passion inside because we can just go on we could be talking about this for like 20 days and I would still be,
and I know, and I'm happy that you decided to name them and shame them, unlike many of our other guests who come, they refrain from naming. But anyway, like you said, to each their own, and God for all, whichever God they believe in. But we need to name them and shame them, because if they are not called out, then they will keep, because these are serial predators.
Yeah, and the thing is, we don't have a justice system, Jerry.
Right.
Now, I do think
justice system. Did you say justice system? Our entire system is created to perpetrate injustice. And that's where I was taking you next. On September 14th, 2020, in the middle of the lockdown, the pandemic, You have three so-called higher caste men who raped a Dalit girl. It's now called the Hathras tragedy, right? What tragedy? You cremated the girl overnight. The UP government, the BJP government, Modi and Yogi, who are far from being yogi in any way, appointed a PR agency called Concept PR to cover up the entire rape so that international news did not report it. What are your thoughts on this? How do you say that a system of justice can prevail in a country like this, where a man called Bobde, Justice Sharad Bobde, who was literally caught with his pants down and his pants fell off, right? Talks to a rapist and gives him advice that would you marry the woman? Would you marry the woman? What are you talking about? Are you a chief justice or are you a chief joker? So what system of justice are we talking about, Tara? Please share your insights and frustrations with us and the audience.
So I have so much to say. I wrote a book about it. So I'm just gonna just give you the salient points. I do think though, okay, I'm gonna start with this. Me Too was a protest and this naming and shaming, and I've been naming and shaming perpetrators on my Facebook, people who were sending me dick pics right from 2012 or 2013, right? I have been sharing this with, I've been like, fuck, you think that it's cool to do this to a stranger? Well, I don't know you, and here's your dick pic on my profile, and I would talk about this. Finally, in 2016, I was thinking of writing this book, and I was like, okay, you know what? I want to see what happens. I want to see what happens if I actually go to the cops. And now I'm in the media. I'm a Savarna, English-speaking, wealthy woman in Juhu, right? And I go to who lives in Juhu. And I go to my local police station and I register a police complaint against 4 of these men who had been constantly sending me dick pics and rape threats and whatever else they were doing. And because I'm in the media and a lot of my friends are journalists and they're all on my social media, I did this and it was instantly covered in the midday, and there was a midday editorial as well about, this woman who intends to take these men down. And then there was a lot of activity from the police station, and I called and things were happening slowly, and then nothing. And then the next year, exactly a year later, one of the men that had sent me a dick pic previously, against whom I had a police complaint, one of the men sent me another dick pic. And so again, I wrote about it again. The Midday and Outlook and everything covered it, saying, woman files FIR, 1 year later, same man harasses her. And again, there was a lot of media, and again, the police got active. They had lost my complaint. They had asked me to rewrite it. And I asked them, I'll send you the hyperlinks of the accounts on an email. No, so I had to physically type it all out. And again, nothing. And then finally in 2018, I kept speaking to my cop, right, to the sub-inspector. And finally in 2018, I called him one day and I said, what's the status of the case? And he said, one of them, the one that had repeatedly offended, one of them had been jailed and bailed in June. And I haven't heard of the case since. Now I'm just thinking, look at the audacity. The fact that we don't have a justice system allows men to offend repeatedly, over and over, knowing that there will be no consequences. The Indian police is corrupt at best and incompetent at worst. We have great laws. For the most part, I refuse to engage in conversations about changing laws because, again, that's the easiest thing. We have no execution and no infrastructure. And these are some things that I am considering and addressing in my next book. Because the lack of a justice system and remarks like what Justice Bobade, who should really step down, remarks like this are what enable men to continue. Like we expect women to go to the justice system, but we just, in the justice system, we encounter delays, but we also, and infrastructural problems and all of that, but we also encounter the same misogyny that we do in real life that we're trying to tackle through this institution.
Very true. And I completely agree with you, and I'm connecting this now with what you had said earlier, that not all men rape, but yes, men who do not rape also have a part to play in the rapes that have done by men. Now I'm going to take you and I'm going to name them again, right? There is a serial offender. I don't think he only thinks he's God's gift. I think he thinks he's the biggest gift to all womankind. His name is Fanish Murthy, another Murthy, right? Fanish Murthy was a serial offender in Infosys. Also the blue-eyed boy of Narayan Murthy and gang, because he used to write big revenues. He was very important for their top line and bottom line. Fanish Murthy was offending and harassing women, not one, multiple, for many years in Infosys. No one took action against it, even though there were internal cases filed. Because at that time, the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act was still lenient. It was not so strict as it is now. Only when the story blew up in media, then the Infosys management, including Narayan Murthy, who calls himself a good man and a noble man and a leader, took action, right? Now, if that had happened today, Narayan Murthy, Nandan Nilekani would all be in jail, because the current Prevention of Sexual Harassment policy holds the promoters liable for not taking action.
Okay, I must say, here again, I want to correct you. Yes, the POSH Act is phenomenal. It's much better than it was. It's tightened. I am happy for the activists that
after 2013.
Yeah, I'm happy for all of it. I'm happy for Justice Leela Seth and the Justice Verma Committee report. I'm happy for all of it. But the fact that you assume that had this happened today, Nandan and Mr. Murthy would have been in jail, is again, we're going back to the fact that there might be an act, but there is no execution.
Yes, and I'll come to that. Now, the same thing happened. Fanish Murthy then left Infosys and he joined another organization called whatever. The name doesn't come to me. Continued his predatory acts over there. Again, the management did not take action, but this was happening in the US. And finally, when it blew up, because one woman decided to fight against it and blew up in the media, that organization is being investigated now. All their promoters are being investigated in the US, the execution that you're talking about. So not only was Fanish Murthy punished, but the entire promoter committee of the organization, including the advisory board, is being held liable. So that's where execution comes in. So I'm completely with you when you say, yes, the act has been made better in 2013. Again, Nirbhaya kind of triggered that. But is it being implemented? Is it being executed? On the other side, you have Tehelka, Tarun Tejpal. He was one of our award recipients. And I won't call him a friend, but he was an acquaintance who used to also support the Rex Karmavir movement. And he was one of our Karmavir award recipients. We revoked his award immediately, because here is a girl who was abused by you. Because again, it was entitlement privilege that you thought you were God's gift to that girl, right? Because you're this great editor of Tehelka. And a woman who was the editor of Tehelka, I forget her name now. Shoma Chaudhary tried to cover it up.
Of course.
And they are running algebra today. Right? I mean, the girl was the daughter of his mentor in Outlook. And I remember all the other award recipients like Oswald Pereira and Maheshwar Peri reached out to me, and it was my birthday, 23rd of November. And they said, we can see that everybody's wishing you happy birthday. But what are you going to do about Tarun Tejpal, who's a Karmavir award recipient? And I said, after investigating, we'll take action. And we revoked his award within the week, right? Now, what I'm trying to say is the action has to be taken, failing which the law is futile. So I completely agree with you. There's no disagreement there.
None.
Right? But the point is, why do we have to take action only after things blow up in the media? What about your integrity? Why did you not take action anyway? Only because it's writing revenues for you? That's
Of
happening.
course.
That's happening in a lot of companies and organizations.
Of course.
Cecilio Adorna, who was the country head of UNICEF in India, was called out for sexual harassment. They only transferred him, no punishment. They transferred him from India to the Philippines. So this is happening in UN organizations. You have a serial offender like Shashi Tharoor, who's moving around like, he's God's gift to humankind. Shashi Tharoor has been called out for sexual harassment in the UN. There are cases against him. But so when you let personalities, this is what I call as idol worship. When you let personalities, take over, and you don't take action against those personalities, it's damaging to the society.
But I have to say, and Jerry, I do agree that India is the world's biggest hypocrisy. I do see that, and I do agree. But I have to say, we didn't believe. It was so hard for people to believe Vinta Nanda's story against Alok Nath, and we were horrified. Like, so what if he's the Sanskari Babu? Like, come on, that's a persona. You need to be able to look at him as an actor versus a person. But then, what did America do about Bill Cosby?
True, very
it was
true.
the same thing. And and I didn't know this until things blew up with Bill Cosby. But I have a really close friend. Marnie is American, and right after things started blowing up around Bill Cosby, she had a Facebook update, and this was something I didn't know about at all. But she said that many years ago, she met Bill Cosby on a street, and he molested her in broad daylight on a street. And she went and told people. She told her friends at that point, many years ago, much before anything blew up around Bill Cosby. And no one believed her. And she said, after things blew up, like 20 years later, after things blew up around Bill Cosby, is when people were writing to her saying, I remember you told me, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you then. But so this cult of personality and celebrity and idol worship exists all around the world. And
Absolutely.
I think that's why I think celebrity culture is not benign.
Absolutely. It comes with its more cons than any pros. Yes. Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. And I think that's the reason it's important, because, the entire Me Too movement, which was triggered, should have had much more consequences, and examples should have been set so that people saw that as a deterrent towards any crime against women. But like you rightly said, be it the United States of America, which prides itself by calling itself the world's greatest democracy. I don't know how they call it the land of the brave and the free. Where are you brave and where are you free? And we are the world's largest, sheerly by numbers, right? 1.35 billion registered citizens. So I completely agree with you. But going forward, Tara, towards concluding our conversation, what do you think we need to do to change this culture, to change society overall, to move from a patriarchal mindset to a more balanced mindset? Today I saw there was something of which the Sadhguru said. I mean, Jaggi Vasudev, the biggest creep of the world, right? I call him the biggest creep because when you see a Asaram Bapu or a Gurmeet Singh or Gurmeet Ram Rahim, whatever he used to call himself, or even a Ramdev, you can see them coming. These guys are wolves. But Sadhguru is more dangerous because he's a wolf in sheep disguise.
Insidious.
Yeah.
Insidious.
And mind you, the case against him for murder was not filed by anyone else but by his own father-in-law in Bangalore, because he cremated the lady's body before his daughter's body before he turned up over there. And he filed the case because he said, no way my daughter has taken samadhi, because even by the scriptures, if you take samadhi, like, Sadhguru eloquently sits over there and talks about she has taken samadhi. He's trying to convince the Shekhar Kapoors and the Anupam Khers of the world. If you take samadhi, you don't cremate a person, you bury them. Right? So why did you cremate? Because you were destroying evidence. Now what happened is the case was filed in Bangalore. He got the case transferred from Bangalore to Coimbatore. and then got his good friend Karunanidhi at that time. Now his good friend is Modi, right? Got Karunanidhi to quash the entire case, and then he harassed his father-in-law and made life miserable for him. That's Sadhguru for you, the so-called enlightened one. And the kind of statements that he makes, that women cannot withstand the power of the sanctum sanctorum. Idiot, the woman gives birth to a man, not no, it's not the men who have the power to withstand the power of the sanctum sanctorum in a temple. That he actually said this, and this is the kind of nonsense he peddles. And educated idiots sit down and listen to him like, he's preaching like the manna from heaven or something. What are your thoughts on this? But this all leads to a
educated idiots is not an oxymoron. They're literally educated idiots. It exists, and I think this. You say you're not political. I am. I've become increasingly political as I've grown, as I've become.
No, when I say I'm not political, I'm not aligned with any party. I hate all of them. That's what I mean to say. I'm neither BJP nor Congress nor Aam Aadmi Party.
Some are worse evils than others. Clearly,
I agree. From time to time, you have to choose the lesser evil.
Yes, and you do, and I think that's the important thing that one has to focus on. But anyway, coming back, I think with
so let me complete my question just to ask you that when you have people like this who preach all nonsense, or Bobade who gives all nonsensical advice, how do you think the citizens can go about changing the culture and improving the culture? That's my final concluding question to you. Going forward, what needs to be done?
Well, I think we all need to be feminists. We all need to raise feminist sons, because the women's rights movement has been around for many, many years. But let's say it reached India in 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We've been teaching women to be empowered and educated.
Right.
We've not been teaching our men and boys how to deal with these empowered and educated women.
Right.
We have not been teaching men and boys that, look, she's worthy and she's an equal. We also, and again, we were talking about politics and the educated idiots that voted Modi into power. When you look at this government and this narrative, which is so full of hate and violence and anger, it destroys the fabric of our society. And one of the people, or one of the sets of people that face the brunt of the anger that is being stirred at the political level is women. You feel anger at your privileged Savarna position being removed by the Dalits below you and the women who should be below you, and at the same time you're unemployed and there is no economically disempowered, and the anger will see consequences in the way gender violence plays out in India, and things will get worse before they get better. The only way they will get better is if every one of us, there is political will, and as I said, the change comes top down, but also that the change comes from every one of us.
Absolutely. And therein lies my fear, and I'm happy that you have, with all integrity and candor, spoken against the current government. And I don't think the current government is worse or better than the past government. They're all the same as far as I'm concerned. But my problem with Modi is that you have made people think of this concept called Hindu state. We are not a Hindu state, we are India, and there is no such thing called Hindu. Hindu was a default word which was created because the Parsis used to call people staying by the river Sindhu as all those Hindus, right? The concept is Sanatan Dharma, which was bastardized by Manu Smriti, which
But Jerry, I don't give a fuck about the past.
Right.
The past can go stuff itself. I don't care about.
But unfortunately, the past is what is peddled to the blind believing bucks. So Modi has not only won because of the educated idiots, he's also won because of the blind believing bucks.
Absolutely, and we need to take stock of what is relevant today.
And Tara, this is important because whether it is ISKCON or Sadhguru or Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, they very, very covertly, sometimes overtly peddle not Sanatan Dharma, which is a pure form of living a life of righteousness and truth. They peddle Manusmriti. Manusmriti is the bastardized version of Sanatan Dharma, where they started creating these castes and the discrimination against women. That happened in Manusmriti. And you will see that there is a book floating around, which they have said that Bill Gates digitized. Bill Gates is another jackass, right? He's the guy who awarded Modi so that he doesn't have to leave the country because they caught him doing illicit clinical trials to test one of his vaccines, right? So they say that Microsoft digitized this version of Sanatan Dharma. It's floating. I'll share it with you on WhatsApp. And when you read it, the first page says Manusmriti. Manusmriti was never Sanatan Dharma. Manusmriti is the version which actually said that there are so many castes and they are the lower caste and we are the higher caste, and the women are lesser powerful and privileged than the men.
So I have to say, Jerry, the one thing that I will tell you is that I know you've picked on the Manusmriti, and I'm apathetic agnostic. I really can. My parents were half Hindu, half Catholic, and I'm neither. But I do say that
makes us both they'll come after us and call us rice bag converts.
Of course. But all religions, which literally, like every other man-made system, literally made by man at a time where physical strength determined the balance of the genders, all man-made systems favor men. So all traditional systems, whether it's legal or educational,
it's the same. It's absolutely. I completely agree with you.
All of them have a basis in patriarchy. So not only the Manusmriti,
that's why you don't have a female pope, right? Christianity is the same hypocrisy. Really?
Same.
Christianity is the same hypocrisy. It's no better. You know, that's why, I mean, they are the guys who redefine patriarchy. Christianity, right? I think Mother Mary was put there as an afterthought as the Virgin Mary, right? And I always struggle, you know, if Adam and Eve were the first two people on earth and then they only had 3 sons, one was killed, right? Then how did the procreation happen, right? How did so
why do you
it's completely so
struggle?
technically
You have to look at it and laugh because it's
sorry.
Why do you even struggle?
So it is, right?
These tales.
No, this is I just add, you know, light-hearted humor when I'm talking to some of my fanatic Christian friends because they also can't accept the truth. But it's the same in any religion. Islam is the same. It's all patriarchy and that entire concept that, you know, the men are more privileged, the men are more powerful. It's complete bunkum, which has to be. I think we need to kind of recreate and retell the narrative.
Absolutely, and it's the narrative that's in our hands, and we're creating it today.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with all of us before we close?
Just that we should all be feminists, and there's no excuse today for us to be blind to privilege and the intersection of privileges. And I think everybody who's watching is clearly privileged. If you look at privilege at an intersection of caste and class and education and location and culture and all of these things, we're clearly privileged. It is really important to use your privilege well. And I think for us to stand up against various forms of injustice, and injustice is all interlinked. You can't say, I support women while also being anti-Muslim or anti-Dalit. You can't. All injustices are linked. So I hope that you evolve into egalitarian thought and actually practice a health, loving life and an activistic life.
Very true. And I completely agree with you because we cannot change everything, but each of us can change something. And that's exactly what we celebrated the Rex Karmaville Global Fellowship Mission. That, you know, if you're doing something small, it's still significant because that would lead to big change and make a big difference. And I'm happy that you shared this with us. And thank you so much for making the time, Tara. We could keep talking, and it has been a delightful experience talking to you. And thank you for all the candor and speaking with all integrity and courage of conviction. And I'm happy that you named a few people, because these people need to be named and shamed, so that others can be careful and beware of them. And one of the topics that we must probably do work on in India is this entire issue. And I always say this, that, the rapes on the street are by far lesser than the rapes which happen at home.
Yeah.
And no one wants to address that. Justice Verma tried to open that can of worms, but they didn't allow him to open it. It's called marital rape. And
Absolutely.
it's huge in India. It's huge. Right?
Jerry, oh my, I've spent a considerable amount of my book discussing the marital rape issue, because all men, I think 9 out of the 9 out of the 9 men I went undercover with, 8 admitted, like, shadi ke baad rape kaisa, which means 8 admitted easily to rape.
Bobde says the same thing.
Yeah, of course.
One sick parasite, I tell you. Yeah.
He should resign, and I'm hoping that the
Absolutely.
letter that all of these feminists have written makes a difference, because the world is also watching what India is doing.
Right.
And that's the only hope we have against this autocracy and this slide into Hindutva, ideology.
And just to conclude, in our leadership coaching, in NLP, in neuroscience, we always say that every human should understand how to balance the feminine and the masculine, because it's in each of us, what is called chemically as the estrogen and testosterone, right? And if we don't find that balance, then we become toxic on both sides. And I would also like to conclude with this one request to all friends and people out there, especially the women out there, because whenever I'm doing a prevention of sexual harassment training, I always tell the women in the groups that the law is very strict today, but please don't misuse the law to play games, to play petty office politics. That's also being done. And just this week, Tara, and I must close on this and get you to finally share your final insight on this, and a request to all the women to be truthful about rapes or crimes against women and not to misuse it. There's this man called Vishnu Tiwari, who's 43 now, who was falsely accused of rape when he was 23. And after 20 years, they finally proven that he was innocent, and he's just come out. Now, you can't give this man his life back, right? And there are many cases of fake sexual harassment cases, which I have seen sitting on some panels in corporates, and I won't name the companies or the people, but my humble request is, please don't misuse the law. Please don't call out rape when there is none. And please don't accuse somebody of sexual harassment just to play petty office politics. Any insights on that? And we'll close after that.
Jerry, I'm thoroughly disappointed that that's what you chose to end on. And I'll tell you why. Yes, the false rape complaint narrative exists. But now 99.1% of rapes, if it includes the current spouse, are not reported to the cops. 85% of rapes, if it doesn't include the spouse, 85% of rapes is not reported to the cops.
Right.
So I'm not saying that there isn't a misuse of the law.
Right.
I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying today that I think when we conclude a conversation, and also I do think that women who misuse the law deserve to be punished.
Right.
Because it allows this false rape complaint narrative, also called the most enduring myth of the world.
Right.
It allows this narrative to be propelled forward.
Right.
But let us actually focus on the grander issue at hand, which is that women need to complain more.
Right.
And not that the stray cases, like there was that woman who was videoed threatening some collection agents just a few months ago, saying, I will file a rape complaint against you, I wanted to smack her face.
Right.
Because they are not feminists. They are misusing something that is not even used in the right way at all.
True.
But that is not the line that I would like you to close with.
No, I
I
wouldn't close on that. And no, I'm sorry that I had to bring this up because it's a message I just received from a woman who's one of our karmovis that, and she actually works for men who are victims, right, of domestic violence and so on. So she actually sent me this, and I had to ask you this because it is a relevant question. And the idea is not to close on it. And I completely agree with you that, you know, whenever I'm doing prevention of sexual harassment trainings and men say the law is so strict, I can't even use the F word because somebody might file a case against me.
Bullshit.
Yeah. So I tell them that it's become strict because of the way you guys have been misusing the entire privilege that you have because you think you're entitled, right? So then now the law is a bitch and it'll come to bite you. So be careful. Would you use the F word in front of your mom? So don't use it in front of a female colleague. She does not like it, right? So that's about it. Because what men do in offices and what men do in society, we all know, right? Because somewhere it is there that, you know, I'm the man, right? It's like when I ask a room full of crowded corporate executives, hey, what does your wife do? Where does she work? Oh, she doesn't work. She's a housewife. I said, we still call them that, housewife. Yeah. And then I tell them, you know, stay at home for one day. The boss and the organization will start looking better, right? Stay at home and work at home for one day. So I completely get what you're saying, but at the same time, there is a flip side. And since it was sent to me, I can't name her. I asked her, should I name you? She said, no. Okay. But she does work for men who are also victims of domestic violence and so on. And that's why I said, let me raise this with you and get you to clarify and give your insights. So the idea was not to close on this, but I just got the question.
Perhaps write a book called Why Women Launch False Rape Complaints, but that's not my book.
Right.
And I'm quite, I do think that the narrative about this false rape complaint is greatly exaggerated.
True.
And we need to focus on the underreporting and not the fake reports that do get lodged.
It's like a stray case which may be false, but that's why I said I'm requesting people not to do this because that dilutes the entire fight for people who are survivors of rape, who are heroes of being raped, you know.
100%.
So, yeah, that was what my request was. I completely get you. I'm with you. We're on the same page, but the question came and I had to ask.
Fabulous.
That's about my integrity. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
have a great evening at the Gold Coast, and we look forward to having you in one of our sessions. We should surely nominate you for the Rex Karmovir Global Fellowship and the Karmovir Chakra Award. We'll send you a mail on that for all the good work that you're doing. All right. Thank you, Tara. Thank you for making the time. Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye.